Part 1. The Driveway Nightmare. 2 days before my wedding, I came home early and found my fiancée had already moved her entire family into my house. Not a suitcase, not a weekend bag. A full-sized moving van was parked halfway on my lawn, its heavy tires sinking into the grass I had spent all spring grooming with my own hands. I could see the fresh ruts in the dirt, a permanent scar on my property. Mattresses were leaning against the porch railing, looking gray and stained against my freshly painted white siding. Children's toys, brightly colored plastic trucks, and headless dolls were already scattered across my living room floor like colorful landmines. And my kitchen cabinets, the oak I had polished until it shone, they already had new, handwritten labels taped to them with messy, jagged handwriting. I stood frozen in my own driveway, keys still biting into my palm, staring at the scene like it was someone else's nightmare. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a dull, rhythmic thud that made my ears ring. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My grandfather's cedar chest, the one I kept locked in the attic, the only thing I had left of him, was sitting on the sidewalk like common trash, half open, with his old medals and letters spilled out in the dirt. That was the first sign. This wasn't just a move-in. This was a raid. This was the moment I realized I didn't know the woman I was about to marry at all. Part 2. The Fortress of Grief. My name is Nolan Hayes. I'm 38 years old. For the last 3 years, this craftsman house outside Richmond was my entire world. After my mother passed away and my sister moved across the country, I felt completely hollow, like a bell that had lost its clapper. The silence in my life was so loud I couldn't sleep. I would just pace the empty hallways until the sun came up. So I bought a wreck of a house, a crumbling skeleton of a building, and I poured every ounce of my grief into it. I sanded every floorboard by hand until my fingers bled and my back felt like it would snap. I replaced every piece of molding. I restored the original fireplace, brick by brick, imagining the fires I would one day build for a family of my own. That house wasn't just real estate. It was my sanctuary. It was the first thing in my adult life that truly felt like mine. It was the place where I finally stopped feeling like a ghost. Then came Sienna Brooks. She had this warm, gentle energy that seemed to fill the cracks in my soul. She'd say, "Nolan, you're so strong, but even the strongest trees need a place to rest their roots." She made me feel that my house was a fortress, and she was its guardian. She planted fresh herbs in the backyard, rosemary and thyme, and told me that a house only breathes when there is love in it. I didn't realize she wasn't helping me build a life. She was scouting a location. She wasn't gardening. She was marking her territory. Part 3. The Mask of Family. Looking back, the red flags weren't just waving. They were screaming in my face. I just chose to ignore them because I was terrified of going back to that silence. I was addicted to the idea of us. Every time Sienna said the word family, it usually came right before a withdrawal from my peace of mind or my bank account. Her mother Denise's emergency medical bills that I paid without question? I found out later the receipts were for a luxury cruise Denise took to the Caribbean to recover from the stress. Her brother's small business loan to get him off the streets? He used it to settle gambling debts with people you don't want to owe money to. Whenever I hesitated, whenever a sliver of logic tried to pierce through my denial, Sienna would use the same emotional weapon. "Don't be cold, Nolan. They're my family. Soon they'll be yours too. Don't you want to be part of something bigger than just yourself?" I started noticing small, invasive things. My mail would be opened before I got home, tucked back into the envelopes with messy folds. My bank statements had tiny pencil marks next to the savings balance. When I asked, Sienna would laugh, that soft, melodic laugh that used to melt me, and say, "I'm just practicing being a good wife, looking after our future, making sure we're prepared." I felt a pang of unease, a cold shiver in my gut, but I drowned it in her gentle smiles and the way she smelled like vanilla and rain. I didn't realize she wasn't looking at our future. She was auditing my assets. She was waiting for the ink on the marriage license to dry so she could liquidate my life. Part 4. The Hostile Takeover. The air inside the house felt different, heavy, smelling of grease and cheap perfume. I walked into my foyer and nearly collided with her cousin, a man I'd met once, who was carrying a greasy microwave through my house like he owned the place. In my kitchen, Sienna stood barefoot, her hair tied back in a messy bun, calmly taping a label that said "Snacks" on my custom oak cabinets. "You're early," she said, her voice flat. No apology, no "I can explain," just an observation that I had disrupted her schedule. "Why are there children living in my house, Sienna?" My voice was a whisper, trembling with a mix of rage and pure, unadulterated shock. Denise, her mother, walked in holding a glass of my expensive bourbon. She sighed dramatically. "Oh, don't be difficult, Nolan. We're in a crisis. My lease fell through unexpectedly. Ava's rental was a nightmare. It's just for a little while, until we get on our feet." Then her sister Ava dropped the bomb that ended my world. "We already changed the kids' school registration to this address this morning. It's official with the county records now." "How?" I stepped back, hitting the counter. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't give permission." Sienna's face shifted. The soft, gentle girl disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "I used the limited power of attorney you signed for me last year, the one for the contractor renovations while you were away on business. I used it to sign the residency affidavits and add my name to the utility accounts." I looked at the kitchen table. There was a blue folder. I opened it with shaking hands. It wasn't just school papers. It was a pre-filled application for a home equity loan. Sienna had been planning to borrow $60,000 against my house to pay off her family's debts the moment we were legally married. She didn't want a husband. She wanted a piggy bank with a roof and a man she could guilt into silence. Part 5. The Midnight Realization. Something inside me didn't just break, no huada. It turned to stone, cold and immovable. "Get every single thing out of my house, right now," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had an edge that stopped Denise mid-sip. The room went dead silent. "Nolan, you're leaving children homeless. You're a monster," Denise began to wail, a practiced, theatrical sound. "No," I said, looking directly at Sienna. "Family doesn't rob you while you're at work. Family doesn't forge your intent behind your back. You have exactly 1 hour before I call the police for trespassing and document fraud. And believe me, I will see you in court for that power of attorney." I spent the next hour standing by the door like a statue. I watched them drag the mattresses back out, scraping against the walls I had painted. I watched them throw the snacks labels into the trash. Sienna stood by the van in the pale blue dress she'd planned to wear to our rehearsal dinner, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time, those tears didn't move me. She wasn't crying because she lost the man who loved her. She was crying because her golden ticket had just been shredded. At 3 a.m., sitting alone in my kitchen, with only the sound of the clock ticking and the faint smell of their cheap cigarettes still lingering, I had one clear, devastating realization. If I marry her tomorrow, I will never get my life back. My house would never be a sanctuary again. It would be a battlefield. This wasn't just about one difficult night. This was about a family of parasites who believed my boundaries didn't matter the moment I became useful to them. Part 6. The Price of Peace. The next morning, as the sun began to bleed over the horizon, I didn't postpone the wedding. I canceled it. I lost $10,000 in deposits. I had to spend the entire day calling every guest, every friend, every relative, and telling them the wedding was over. Sienna's last text to me was a jagged blade. "You'll always be alone in that big, empty house. You're a selfish, broken man who doesn't know how to love." I didn't reply. I blocked her number. Because she was wrong. My house isn't empty. It's full of peace. It's full of a silence that I no longer fear. I turned that guest room, the one they tried to claim, into a study with deep green walls and my grandfather's cedar chest. I cleaned the dirt off the wood and placed it under the window where the light hits it every morning. Love should never ask you to disappear so that others can be comfortable. Love should never use your kindness as an open door for a hostile takeover. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do, the most heroic thing, is to say no. Even if it means canceling the wedding, disappointing everyone you know, and standing completely alone in the house you fought so hard to keep. If you've ever been asked to be understanding while someone slowly stripped away your rights, your money, and your soul, tell me in the comments. Would you have gone through with it just to avoid the drama? Or would you have changed the locks like I did? I read every single comment. And remember, the most dangerous betrayals aren't always loud and violent. Sometimes they come wearing the mask of love, whispering sweet promises, and they move in before you even realize the door was left unlocked. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.